Let me tell you who Dave Lunn is. Dave came here to study from New Brunswick in 2006, and that's from a long ways away, right across the country, about as far as you can get from here in Vancouver. But Dave came and studied apologetics. He did the Master of Theological Studies within the apologetics specialization here. And Dave and I became friends very soon after he got here. It wasn't too long after that he became my TA, teaching assistant, and a little later on became the departmental assistant for the apologetics division here at ACTS. And so we worked together on lots of different projects over the years. And Dave has become a good friend. He also did his thesis on this issue of hell and issues related to that. And so he's a perfect guy to address this for us tonight. Our topic is, as we said before, hard questions about hell. I know if you've been out there engaging anybody on matters of faith and Christianity and religion, you will probably have come up against this issue. For a variety of reasons, people raise questions about the issue of hell. And it's good that we have a chance to address it. So would you join me in welcoming Dave Lunn at this point to give us our lecture tonight.
At the age of 4, I was standing on my tiptoes and grabbing hold of the side of a casket, peering into the face of my friend Buddy. Buddy had gone swimming when his parents had told him not to, and he had gone swimming alone. And what happened was an undertow grabbed hold of him and pulled him under the water, and he drowned. So now, as a 4-year-old, I'm staring at my friend, asking my mother, why won't Buddy wake up? At the age of 4, I was confronted with the question, what happens when we die? And this isn't a question that's unique to me. It's woven into the very psyche of our North American culture, and it's potently visible in our media. When you think about movies, you have What Dreams May Come, Dragonfly, The Sixth Sense, Flatliners. Each of these movies vividly depicts the image of what the directors think afterlife may be like. Music, you have songs like The Other Side, Where the Streets Have No Name, Tears in Heaven, Highway to Hell, Spirit in the Sky. Each one of these songs contemplates what lies beyond death. When we look to our literature, it's there too. This was made so evident in the frenzy that was caused by the release of the book Heaven's for Real. And in March of 2011, it topped New York Times bestsellers list. And in this book, a 4-year-old depicts or retells with the help of his father what he perceives heaven to be like. So the frenzy that was caused shows that this isn't just something arbitrary, but it's something that's very important to all of us. In the Christian faith, this afterlife is depicted as eternal joy and bliss for those who believe in Jesus, and eternal torment for those who do not, for everyone else. And it's this cardinal doctrine that has led some to leave the faith. John Loftus, who actually went to Trinity Evangelical Divinity School with Paul Chamberlain, has left the faith, and this played a part in it. He's written a book called Why I Became an Atheist. And in the book he writes, the notion of a punishment after we die is sick and barbaric. The concept of hell was developed among superstitious and barbaric people. Even the new atheists have piped up on this aspect, and we have Christopher Hitchens in his book, God is Not Great, right? Nothing proves the man-made character of religion as obvious as the sick mind that designed hell. Now, Christopher Hitchens passed away in December of 2011, so he may know more whether hell is a fabrication of the mind or is a reality, even more so than us now. These objections point to a question that fundamentally challenges the character of God. It's the question of How can an all-loving, all-powerful God allow people to go to hell? This question of hell is really the question of evil, the problem of evil. It's simply the question of evil applied to a specific type of evil, hell. The evil of eternally tormenting people for sins that were committed in a limited time period, simply because they did not believe in a specific person. So the primary objection here is not that individuals are punished for the wrong they do. Instead, it is the degree to which they are punished. Why should one's lack of belief in a certain person require eternal torment, eternal punishment for a few acts, wrong acts, in a limited time frame? Quite simply, the punishment does not seem to fit the crime. Now, as Christians have attempted to reconcile this misappropriation of pain with the benevolence of God, there tends to be two questions that theologians, philosophers try to answer. The first is, what is hell? And the second is, who goes there? Tonight we're going to be focusing on the first question, what is hell? And there's been 4 views that have become the popular views of our time, and they have a history within Christianity. So I'm just going to present a few of them and then go a little deeper with 2 of them. First off, I want to recognize that the questions and debates regarding hell, we know from the writings of Tertullian or Origen, who were church fathers in the 2nd century, that it's a 19th century long debate, and I have no misconception or visions of grandeur that I'm going to solve it all tonight. Tonight I just want to present the options. The first of these options is a view called annihilationism or conditionalism. In this view, hell is understood as a metaphor for ceasing to exist or being destroyed at death. So when one dies, that's it. And hence the term annihilationism. The second view is one called the temporal view. And in the temporal view, what happens is one goes to hell until he or she has paid for the amount of sin that they have accrued over their span of life, or they accept the payment of Jesus for their sin. There's kind of a debate as to whether there's a post-death opportunity for salvation. So some who hold to the temporal view would say that you can accept Jesus in hell and leave. Now for the temporal view, they agree that the punishment of eternal torment for a limited amount of actions is unjust. Hence why they've kind of limited the scope of hell till when you've paid up. And then once you've paid up, you're allowed to go into heaven. But this view should not be confused with the Roman Catholic doctrine of purgatory. And those who have grown up in the Catholic faith might be familiar with this view. And purgatory is actually a third place in Roman Catholicism. It's neither heaven nor hell. It's a place where people wait until the return of Christ, and during that time, they are purified and prepared for Christ's return. So it is not a temporal hell. It is a third state. Now, annihilationism and the temporal view tend to be in the minority, but they're still held by well-educated people, which is why they've been presented here. The next 2 views tend to be more popular in our churches, and they're the view of the literalist and the eternal conscious view. Now, the literalist holds that hell is literally a place of a place of fire where there's sulfur and weeping and gnashing of teeth, and that one goes there and is punished and tormented for eternity. And they must face the objection, how does a loving God allow for this to happen? How does a loving God allow someone who's committed a few sins in a limited time frame suffer for eternity? And I'm going to give some reasons for holding that view after I present the conscious view, or the eternally conscious view. And I've used the term eternally conscious view because there's two titles that we tend to know this as, but I think they offer too much confusion. The first is the metaphorical view. So it's sometimes understood as this because hell is a metaphor for eternal separation, relational separation from God. And since annihilationism or conditionalism understands hell to be a metaphor as well, you can easily confuse the two if you're just using the term metaphor or metaphorical view. The second view, or second title for this, which I believe is a bad title, is called the traditional view. And I think that puts this view in an unfair place of, or position of prestige or advantageous position, because each of these views would argue that they have a historical following throughout Christianity. So to call it the traditional view is a little unfair, which is why I've opted for this eternal conscious view, which says we are eternally conscious that we are separated from a relationship with God in hell. So then, if that's the case, isn't that just as unfair as the literalist view? To say, I did some things wrong in my life, but now I have to suffer for eternity, separated from God. I'd like to share with you three responses that are given to that objection when you hold to a literalist view or a eternal conscious view. The first is that, well, when you go to hell, hell's kind of like prison. And in prison, people will not just serve the time that for their original offense. What happens is they start doing other criminal offenses in prison. So they have time added onto their sentence. And what this response says is, well, in hell, the same thing happens. People go to hell, they're serving their original penalty, but then in hell they sin. So their time in hell gets extended. And this view breaks down to, why are people in hell for eternity? Because people don't stop sinning. And infinite punishment does fit the crime of infinite sin. The second view is one that looks at this a little differently. Instead of focusing on the act, it focuses on the one the act is against, the one who is offended. And we see this even in our own court systems. And if you'll entertain me for a moment, and since I have the mic, I'm not sure you have much of a choice. I want to tell you a story about Pa Kettle. And Pa Kettle was walking in the woods one day, enjoying the summer sun, and a mosquito buzzed by and landed on his arm. So Pa Kettle lifts up his hand, and he brings his hand down on the mosquito and crushes it and takes its life. There's no police investigation. There's no allegations that he's committed some sort of offense. He simply brushes off the mosquito and continues enjoying his summer stroll. Now let's take Pa Kettle, and instead of it being a mosquito, he's walking with his loyal dog, Buck. And he and Buck are walking in the woods. He's throwing a stick, and Buck's catching it and bringing it back. And Buck's he's a little slow now, and Pa Kettle's decided, Buck's had a good life. It's about time for him to be put in the ground. So he takes out his shotgun and does away with Buck. In today's age, there would be an investigation. He would likely face charges of animal cruelty and possibly up to 2 years in prison. There's a difference in the being offended here. Now let's take out the mosquito, let's take out Buck, and put Ma Kettle walking with him. And he makes the same decision. If he kills Ma Kettle, what happens is there's a criminal investigation, he's brought up on charges of first-degree murder, and he faces a life sentence, or in some states, the death penalty. In each 3 of these instances, the same act has been committed, the taking of a life. But in each instance, the being acted against is changed. And I would say rightly so, the consequence is different. Now let's think about what would happen if we were to commit an act against an infinite being. What type of punishment, what type of consequence would be just if we were to act against an infinite being? It seems that an infinite punishment or eternal punishment would be the appropriate response. Now, in addition to these 2 views, there's a third response I'd like to offer, which is found in the writings of the Church Father Augustine and in the 20th century apologist C.S. Lewis. Now, Augustine and Lewis both present that heaven and hell are actually a way of our free will being preserved and honored in the afterlife. But before we can look at free will in the afterlife, we need to look at it in this life. The purpose of free will in this life, what is it? The purpose is to give us the opportunity to be self-governing beings, to make decisions for ourselves. In other words, free will allows us to make decisions, and in making those decisions, different decisions have different consequences. And this is what gives the decisions value or meaning. If all decisions had the same result, then what would it matter if we chose? If I have this bottle here, what does it matter if I drink water or Javix? This end result would be the same if different decisions didn't have different consequences. It would not matter if this was full of water, which gives life, or Javix, which takes life. Now, the decision we make regarding heaven and hell emphasizes both the privilege and responsibility that free will gives us, and also leads to the question, how do we have free will in heaven or hell? If heaven is full of good things, how can we choose what is bad? And if hell is full of bad things, how can we choose what is good? Where is the choice in the afterlife? Well, for those in heaven, free will is preserved by individuals having multiple choices, all of which are for the good. And the lack of a choice for evil isn't a violation of the free will, because this ultimate desire for the good is shown by a person's decisions in life. In life, prior to death, we have the opportunity to choose evil. And if a decision, and we have the opportunity to embrace good or reject good, to embrace evil or reject evil. And each time we make these choices, we demonstrate what our desire is. So if we make a choice for the good, we demonstrate a desire for the good. And if we make a choice for the evil, we demonstrate a desire for evil. So does heaven and hell end up being basically a calculation of how many good things I choose versus how many bad things? I would say not. What I would say is that we see the ultimate decision regarding good and evil in our decision regarding God. if the church father Anselm was right, and God is the good without which there is no good, or if God is good, is the very definition of good, or more accurately, the very definition of who good is, then our embracing or rejecting of God demonstrates the ultimate desire of our will. And let me use another story here, the story of Hans and Franz, two brothers. Now Hans has a desire for what is good. Everything that is good, this is what Hans wants. Yet in life he finds himself having to choose evil sometimes, not because he wants to, but because of a character trait in him or a circumstance which has blocked his choice for good. And sometimes he goes to choose good and accidentally chooses evil and discovers that his choice was actually evil in the end. Now, if Hans desires what is good, then for him, a place where all his choices are good, no matter what he chooses, it has a good consequence. For him, that would be the ultimate actualization of the will, of his will. It would be him getting what he truly wants, what is good. Now consider Franz, whose desire is for evil, and he wants to do evil things and seek out evil opportunities, but his options for evil are blocked, again by a character trait or some sort of situation or circumstance, or even an accidental choice for good. For Franz, Hans's heaven would not be what he desired. Instead, what would be Franz's desire is for a place where all his choices can be for the evil, can be to embrace evil. For him, hell would be the ultimate actualization of his will. So, in heaven and hell, what we have is the ultimate actualizations of our will. We get what we want. So, how then is God just even if he gives us what we want? Isn't it better to be in heaven with what we don't want than to be in hell with what we do want? Well, let's consider what it means to be free beings again. Remember that in order for our decisions to have value, there must be different consequences. And for that value and meaning to be given, we have to accept, God has to accept our decision, even if it is to reject him. I also wonder what reason there is to believe that if someone has decided to embrace hell, to embrace evil, and to reject God, what reason we would have to believe they would want out of hell if they have rejected good at its most fundamental and elementary level, if they have rejected God. At the very least, we cannot answer this question. This is something that can only be known by an all-knowing or omniscient being. Moreover, in light of what we've already explored, there does not seem to be any logical indication they would change their mind. So then, how is it unjust for God to give us what we have chosen? The temporal view and the conditional view of hell deal with deal with this injustice in two different ways. One limits the scope of punishment, and the other says that we cease to exist, thereby we do not experience the torment. It is just over. But the literalist view and the eternal conscious view must address this apparent injustice. And we've seen from these three responses that there doesn't really seem to be any injustice going on. Instead, what we have is a God whose love for us demands that he honor our choice, even if it means that we are eternally separated from him. In the end, true love wins, a love that does not coerce, a love that does not force itself, but a love that respects, and a love that pursues.